We now have the pleasure of being joined by Ethan Joyce, college sports reporter for the Winston-Salem Journal. Ethan, thank you so much for coming on today.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
So we brought you on to talk about this outstanding, and I think really surprisingly outstanding, Wake Forest football team. What's going on right now in Winston-Salem? The Deacs are 5-0 and the highest ranked team nationally in the ACC.
Yeah, I think you're finally seeing a combination of a few things happen for them. Their offense has always been good. I think what you're seeing now is a defense that's got a lot of experience and a lot of depth that it didn't have. They've run into issues where injuries have really depleted some position groups in years past. And now you're seeing a group of guys that are all very talented, but can all be relied on and play when they're needed to. So you're seeing that depth turn into more quality defense. You're seeing a team that has a lot of super senior leadership that's back, which you could say that about a lot of football teams in college football right now. But I think you're just seeing that stuff combined together for them, and they're a pretty well-rounded, tough to beat team right now.
Ethan, you look at the offense in particular for Wake. I mean, this offensive unit hasn't put up less than 35 points in a game this season. What's enabled them to be so successful?
Yeah, I think it kind of leans back on a little bit of what I hit on there, but it's a bunch of guys that have been playing in this system for a while now. You know, you're going to see this offense on Saturday, and it's an offense that starts off slowly and reacts to a weak point as quickly as it sees one. And you've got a bunch of guys starting with Sam Hartman at quarterback that are really comfortable in this offense. You've got a slot receiver in Ja'Cory Roberson who's surrounded by guys that are really good on the outside too. And they all kind of take some pressure off each other. And I think if you'd asked me at the start of this season how I would challenge this team, I'd probably say make them run against you just to see if they can sustain it. And the thing about this is, you know, Wake Forest lost Kenneth Walker to Michigan State, but they've got a pretty deep group of running backs that are pretty damaging when it comes to fortifying a ground game for long enough to get big shots through the air.
Speaking of the air, anyone who's followed the ACC for a while has followed the journey of Sam Hartman, who, started. Jamie Newman comes in, loses the starting job. Jamie Newman transfers and opts out that year, and Hartman's now back in the role. He's already getting pretty close to passing his most touchdown passes in a season. He could do it in this game. If he throws 5 against Syracuse, he's met his most touchdowns in a single season. What has it been like to see Hartman kind of actualize or realize the full powers that he has at quarterback?
Yeah, Sam, it's always been interesting. And my perspective is a little more unique because I kind of watched for afar as like not covering Wake Forest. And now I'm kind of getting to see him in real time, and he's all business, and he's a very focused guy. He's all about football all the time. And I think it's a guy that's just so comfortable in what he's doing, and a guy that, has dealt with some challenges. He had some injuries in one of his seasons, and, that allowed Jamie Newman to slip in and finish out. And then, he loses a battle to Jamie Newman, who was a great college quarterback himself. It's not a bad problem to have when you have 2 legit starting QB contenders, but Sam's been challenged. He's been molded by that. And I think you're really just seeing a guy realizing the promise that he came in with and showing how comfortable he is. I mean, he led some drives against Louisville, which turned into a fourth quarter firefight. And without Sam, that win doesn't happen. It's just as simple as that. And he just makes plays.
He's got the experience for sure. He's a fourth-year sophomore, which he has to be one of the few. Although COVID has made all eligibility kind of go out the window, but he's got to be one of the few fourth-year sophomores in the ACC. For people who haven't seen him play, if they haven't watched the ACC or Wake for the last couple of years, what would you say is Sam's kind of main attribute, the thing that really makes him good?
I think Sam is probably best. I feel like his first reads are always really good. And when I say that, you obviously have a first read in a play, but I feel like more often than not, he just about knows where he's going with the ball pretty quickly. And that's a product of the offense too. It's a slow mesh offense that, again, kind of tries to bait the defense into doing something first so it can capitalize on the weak point. And, Sam has been really good, especially in the short range stuff. They do a lot of stuff kind of in the shorter range. And that's where you've really seen A.T. Perry, another wide receiver, really thrive this year as a guy who's kind of coming into his own this season. He had a quieter game against Louisville, but he's really having a breakout year so far. And part of that's just because Sam making really good decisions and getting the ball to the guy that's open on given plays.
Almost 1,300 yards for him and 11 touchdowns through 5 games. Only had 13 touchdowns last year. Overreaction or not an overreaction to say that he is by far playing the best football of his collegiate career?
Yeah, the funny thing about looking at last season is for Wake Forest, it ended very flat. The last stretch of their season, I think out of the last 4 conference games that was scheduled, only one actually got played. We all kind of saw COVID affect games in different ways or affect conference starts in different ways. Wake Forest got really hit hard by that at the end of the season. And I think you saw a team kind of lose its rhythm and kind of lose its heart in the season at the same time, because I think we all struggled through 2020 in different ways, but trying to play a game when not much else is fun in the world is a hard thing to do. And another thing about his stats too is if you look at it up until the bowl game, he really hadn't thrown many interceptions, and he had a pretty terrible ending to the season last year. So I think he was really coming into form last year, and it may have been noticed more if it hadn't been such a herky-jerky year. But he's really shining now with a lot of eyes on them, frankly.
8-5 in 2019, only 4-5 last year, already more wins than that this year. As you mentioned, do you sort of just chalk that up to being a bit of a fluke, whether it was a COVID year, injuries, whatnot, or are there any really stark differences between last year and this year that have accounted for the difference in the product on the field?
Yeah, I think a lot of it you can probably point back to just the heart of a team being attacked by the nature of 2020. I do think of the defense and the step forward it's making is a big deal. Their defensive line is a very deep group, and they have quite a few pass rushers right now that are very effective. It's either 3 or 4 guys that have registered at least a couple sacks. One of those guys is a guy that came from Michigan named Luigi Villain, and he's been killer for them. So I think you're just seeing a defense progressing, a defense that has depth to deal with the potential injury or two that usually pops up in a football season, and a team kind of riding the course on what it typically is.
To play a bit of devil's advocate on the defense, although they held the first 4 teams under 20 points, Louisville last week was the worst that they have played, at least scoring wise. 34 points allowed. What was kind of working for the Cardinals? Where was the spot that this defense finally gave in?
Yeah, I think what you saw with Louisville was really the first team that could be physical. And part of that's just the style of offense Louisville runs. They very much lean heavily on their run game, and that sets up everything for them. And I mean, I know that pretty extensively because I covered Scott Satterfield for a few years while he was App State's head coach. It's a physical brand of football, and you have to be a sure tackler and you have to be ready for it. And Louisville came out looking really good, piecing drives together, getting some quick scores. But I do think you saw that defense adjust in the second half. They went from, I'm trying to think of the split between the first half and the second half, but they managed to hold Louisville to a lot less offense in the second half. And really a lot of its production came on a 75-yard touchdown pass that was kind of a response to a Wake Forest score that kept that game tight. So I think that was a good game for them to kind of be challenged at this point in time in the season, because if you look at their schedule, it started off kind of soft. It shifted to a Florida State team that athletically is probably still up there, but just is not a very good team. And then they get challenged on the road at Virginia and handle it with ease. So I think the Louisville game was a needed reminder for this team. And I think it was a proving game too, because I feel like Louisville will probably end up being one of the better teams in the ACC when it's all said and done. And Wake sure looks like that right now.
The Wake run defense in particular has been great. The passing defense has been maybe an area to nitpick. You allow 407 yards through the air to UVA. Even Louisville threw for 309. You look at the flip side of that from a Syracuse standpoint, and it's really been a one-dimensional running offense for the Orange so far this season. Do you expect Dino Babers to maybe let Garrett Schrader air it out a little more than we're used to because of a Wake secondary that has been a bit suspect at times?
I think the difficulty of gauging the Virginia game was that Wake was so ahead for that second half. You saw Virginia move the ball a lot because not that they were playing prevent, but they were just trying to keep a lid on plays from becoming bigger than they could have. So do I think they'll challenge it? Maybe. I think they're going to have to challenge it a little bit for their offense to play well, just because, like you said, they have leaned very run heavy this year. I think the Louisville game was a great precursor for Wake Forest to have for this one, as another team that's really going to try to pound inside and be physical, and Wake's going to have to stand up to that test on the road.
So we're recording this on Thursday, which means that, media availability has happened throughout this week. What kind of stuff has Clawson said about Syracuse in general?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a lot of points made on the run game and needing to be effective against that early, because, the run game and setting it up in football is such a rhythm thing where if you're able to find that early, it really kind of sets up the way you can dance the rest of the game. So that's been a big key for them. And I mean, when they were talking about the Louisville matchup, Clawson was mentioning that they were going to need their secondary to be sure tacklers. I think that's an area that they've grown in over the last couple seasons. And I think they're set up to try to handle this offense well. I think if they try to get into a low scoring game with Syracuse, that's when it becomes a little more dangerous. I think if Wake can come out fast, maybe set up a margin that's too deep of a hole and kind of ride it out like they did in the Virginia game, I think that's probably their best strategy in this one. But I'm definitely interested to see how it pans out and how this run defense tries to follow up what was a solid second half against a very good Louisville team.
You look at the way the schedules is shaped out so far for both of these teams already. 3 conference games under Wake's belt. How much of an advantage do you think that's going to be compared to an Orange team that's only played the 1 conference game so far?
Yeah, I think it was really good for Wake to I think the games they got to start conference play, that was a good way to start it, just because you got a Florida State fan base that came in and added to what was a really good attendance day here in Winston-Salem. And then, Virginia's home atmosphere is pretty phenomenal. I think I didn't know what to expect. That was my first trip there, but it was a really good road test to start the year. I think that really helps. And I mean, you're talking about the schedule and just overall, Wake needed to get through those first couple of ACC games to kind of set the tone for what the rest of the season could be. And I think that's why you're seeing, if they can get past the Syracuse team, you're talking about the potential to maybe get to an 8-0, maybe a 9-0, depending on how things shake out. Because, they, like I said, they start off with a couple of easy wins. They got into conference play pretty emphatically. And I think they are pretty well set up, at least as things stand right now, to keep adding to this win total.
Those 3 games at Syracuse, then Army, then Duke. And after that, you start to get to some of the heavy hitters with North Carolina, NC State, Clemson. Given that there's kind of a weaker 3 and then a stronger 3, is this almost like a 3-game trap game for Wake where they have to try and get up for teams that really aren't going to be their top competition?
I don't know if it's a trap game, but when I looked at the schedule at the start of the year, I looked at that Army game and thought, like, that might be one of the hardest games they play before you get to the meat of the schedule, like you were alluding to, which is at North Carolina, at NC State, versus NC State, at Clemson, at Boston College. You're getting Army following your off week at home. That's not going to be an easy place to travel. It's a military school with option football. That's a lot of variables that aren't normal, so to me, looking at that one's an indicator of just how sharp this football team can stay. I think you're spot on, though, that this 3-game stretch is one where they should win all of them. If they do win all of them and you're sitting at 8 wins when you enter the last 4 games of that season, that's really about all you can ask for this Wake Forest team. And, you're talking about a conference that's had some shaky performances all around. And those wins in that last 4-game stretch look a lot more attainable than they did in, July and August and early September.
All right, Ethan, we're done with most of the serious stuff now, but we figured while we have you, we might have a little bit of fun. For those who don't know, Ethan is a Syracuse grad, so we're going to do a little bit of rapid fire questions here, answer in a sentence or a word. If we like it, we might ask you to explain, but we'll just go back and forth and give you a few.
Okay.
So you were talking about Wake Forest wins 8-0. Also, as you know, Syracuse, kind of a basketball town over a football town. So do you think that Wake Forest football or Wake Forest men's basketball will win more ACC games this year? Just for the listeners, the basketball team plays twice as many ACC games. However, they haven't won more than 6 since 2017.
Boy, this is tough. And I've gotten to see a couple of Wake open practices, and it's a very different looking team. That said, with the current trend and the way the football team's playing, I would probably lean toward football right now. I think that's a safer bet.
All right, Ethan. Well, how about if you had a power rankings list for all of the ACC mascots, who do you got higher up on that list? Otto the Orange or the Wake Forest Demon Deacon?
The Deacon is a great mascot. Otto, so this is probably more than you're asking for. I'm not a big mascot person. To me, I file them away in the same space as clowns, and I don't really want to be around them. So when I was a student at Syracuse and Otto came through the crowd, I wanted nothing to do with him. That said, I appreciate both of the mascots. I think the Deacon is. I think there are so many cool logos with the Demon Deacon in it, and so I think it makes. And plus, he rides out on a motorcycle. He's been a pretty fun and cool mascot in my time around. So
the mascot battle is going to go to Wake. Now, talking about the fans of each team, I won't make you choose one over the other because you obviously have connections to both places. But what makes them different? What's something you like about Syracuse fans that's unique and then Wake fans that's unique?
I say I'm still getting acclimated to the Wake fan base. I think the Wake fan base is a smaller one just because it's a smaller school, but very passionate about their sports, very hopeful all the time. I like Syracuse fans because I think they're super edgy. I think they really play into you know, I think what you imagine New York City fans to be like, I think you can say the same thing for Syracuse fans, and that they are very critical and appreciative of not just good sports, good basketball, but I think they're appreciative of like thoughtful conversations about sports teams. And I think maybe that's why they appreciate all the reporters that come out of Newhouse, hopefully.
All right, well, that's the fan bases. In terms of the actual locations, how would you say, the city of Syracuse compares to the city of Winston-Salem, maybe the biggest difference between the two? As someone who spent time in both, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of grew up around this area. Winston was always the main city that we would come to do anything. I think Syracuse is is a very legit college town. And that's not to say Winston-Salem's not, but you don't think college town right away when you think Winston-Salem. And I think that when I think about Syracuse. I miss the Syracuse food scene a lot. Just because of the sheer amount of different cuisines you could find there. I'm curious what the population difference is between Syracuse and Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem's a good sized city. That's probably it. I miss the fact that you can kind of walk all over Syracuse and stumble on things that you haven't seen before.
So Winston-Salem, about 240,000 people. Syracuse, I believe, is 140,000 people.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was probably Winston-Salem gets a bigger footprint than Syracuse does. And so that probably contributes to that. I feel like Syracuse is like very much a top tier college town. And I miss that. I miss being able to walk around a neighborhood like that.
Well, speaking of food, I have to ask you a question that I think there's an obvious answer to, but I'm not sure.
Oh, no.
Dinosaur barbecue or Southern barbecue?
Wow. The Southerner in me is just like, you can't say dinosaur barbecue because I know there have been some hole in the wall places that I probably can't remember the name of, but had awesome barbecue experiences. I love dinosaur barbecue. I love it. I miss dinosaur barbecue. I'll tell you what else I miss too. I miss the spicy hot tomato oil at that. What is that restaurant?
Possibilities.
Yes. I miss that stuff.
That's a Syracuse staple.
I miss that stuff. So yeah, I think I'm going to go push on don't make me pick between NC barbecue and dinosaur barbecue.
All right.
I got to live down here.
It's a good non-answer. Johnny, you got any more rapid fire?
No, that's it for me.
All right. Well, you passed the test beautifully. Ethan, thank you so much for coming on and giving us some insight on the Deacs.
Thanks, fellas. I appreciate it.